The intergalactic market was a chaotic symphony of sights, sounds, and smells. Bright neon lights flickered above stalls selling everything from exotic fruits to advanced technology. Strange creatures of all shapes and sizes moved through the crowd, their voices blending into a cacophony of languages. Somewhere in the middle of it all, a man stood in front of a small, dimly lit stall, his eyes fixed on the alien. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin was a soft, shimmering silver, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. She sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap, her expression unreadable. Around her neck was a thin, glowing collar that hummed softly. The trader, a rough-looking man with scars across his face, noticed the man's interest and stepped forward. "Interested?" the trader asked, his voice low and gravelly. "She's a rare one. Silent, but strong. Perfect for whatever you need." The man didn't respond immediately. He couldn't explain why, but something about the alien drew him in. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he felt a strange connection, as if she was trying to tell him something without words. He had come to the market looking for nothing in particular, but now, he felt compelled to take her with him. "How much?" he asked, his voice steady. The trader grinned, revealing a row of crooked teeth. "For you? A fair price. But be warned, she's not like the others. She's special." The man didn't ask what that meant. He handed over the credits, and the trader removed the glowing collar from the alien's neck. She flinched slightly but remained silent. The man reached out a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. Her touch was cool, almost electric, and he felt a shiver run down his spine. As they walked away from the stall, the man couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped into something much bigger than himself. The alien moved gracefully beside him, her eyes scanning the crowd as if searching for something, or someone. He wanted to ask her questions, but she gave no indication that she could speak. Her silence only added to the mystery. When they reached his ship, he gestured for her to sit in the co-pilot's seat. She obeyed without a word, her movements precise and deliberate. As the ship lifted off and left the market behind, the man glanced at her. She was staring out the window, her expression unreadable. He wondered what she was thinking, what she had been through, and why she had ended up in that stall. Hours later, they arrived at his home, a small, secluded cabin on the edge of a forest. He led her inside, offering her food and water, but she refused both. Instead, she wandered through the rooms, her fingers brushing against the walls and furniture as if trying to understand her new surroundings. The man watched her, his curiosity growing with every passing moment. That night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't sleep. His mind was filled with questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why did he feel such a strong need to protect her? He didn't have any answers, but one thing was clear, his life would never be the same. The next morning, he woke to find her standing in the living room, staring at an old family photo on the wall. Her eyes were fixed on the image, and for the first time, he saw emotion in them, sadness, longing, and something else he couldn't quite place. He approached her slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Do you recognize this?" he asked, his voice soft. She didn't respond, but her hand reached out, hovering just above the photo. Then, without warning, she turned and walked away, leaving him more confused than ever. The man didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The alien's silence was hiding a secret, one that would change both their lives forever. Days turned into weeks, and the man grew more accustomed to the alien's presence. She moved through his home like a shadow, silent and observant. He tried to communicate with her, but she gave no indication that she understood his words. Still, he noticed small things, the way her eyes lingered on certain objects, the faint tremble in her hands when she touched something familiar. It was as if she was searching for something, but he didn't know what. One evening, as the man sat in his living room, he heard a soft sound coming from the kitchen. He turned to see the alien standing by the counter, her hand resting on an old radio. The device was broken, its dials rusted and its speakers silent. But as she touched it, something strange happened. The radio crackled to life, emitting a faint, static-filled hum. The man froze, his eyes wide with surprise. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien didn't respond. Instead, she tilted her head, as if listening to something only she could hear. The radio's static grew louder, and for a moment, the man thought he heard a voice, a faint, distorted whisper that sent a chill down his spine. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the radio fell silent again. The man approached her cautiously. "Can you fix things?" he asked, though he knew it was more than that. What he had just witnessed wasn't normal. It was something beyond human understanding. The alien looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm. Her touch was cool, but it sent a wave of warmth through him. For the first time, he felt a connection, a silent understanding that words couldn't convey. The next morning, the man woke to find the alien standing by the window, staring out at the forest. Her silver skin shimmered in the sunlight, and her expression was one of deep concentration. He joined her, following her gaze to a spot in the distance where the trees seemed to sway unnaturally, as if disturbed by an unseen force. "What is it?" he asked, though he didn't expect an answer. The alien turned to him and pointed toward the forest. Her hand trembled slightly, and her eyes were filled with urgency. The man hesitated. He had never ventured far into the woods, but something in her expression told him he had no choice. "Okay," he said, nodding. "Let's go." They set out together, the alien leading the way. Her movements were swift and deliberate, as if she knew exactly where she was going. The man followed closely, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and curiosity. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. The air grew colder, and the trees seemed to close in around them. The man couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing. In the center stood a strange, metallic structure, a device of some kind, covered in symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. The alien approached it, her hand reaching out to touch the surface. As soon as her fingers made contact, the symbols flared to life, casting an eerie glow across the clearing. The man stared in awe. "What is this?" he whispered. The alien turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She pointed to the device, then to the sky, as if trying to explain something. The man didn't understand, but he knew one thing: this was no ordinary object. It was connected to her past, and to whatever danger she was trying to warn him about. As they stood there, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The man stumbled, his heart racing. The alien grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. She pulled him away from the device just as a beam of light shot into the sky, illuminating the clearing with a blinding glow. The man shielded his eyes, his mind reeling. What had they just activated? And what did it mean for them, and for Earth? The alien's silence was no longer just a mystery. It was a warning. And the man knew, deep down, that their lives were about to change forever. The beam of light faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the clearing in silence. The man stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. The alien beside him was equally still, her glowing eyes fixed on the now dormant device. The forest around them felt heavier, as if the very air was holding its breath. "What was that?" the man asked, his voice trembling. He didn't expect an answer, but he needed to say something, anything, to break the tension. The alien turned to him, her expression unreadable. She pointed to the device, then to the sky again, her movements urgent. The man frowned, trying to piece together what she was trying to tell him. Was the device a signal? A weapon? Or something else entirely? Before he could ask more questions, a noise broke the silence, a low, mechanical hum that seemed to come from all directions. The man spun around, his eyes scanning the trees. The alien grabbed his arm, her grip tight, and pulled him toward the edge of the clearing. Her movements were quick and deliberate, as if she knew exactly what was coming. They barely made it into the cover of the trees when a small, drone-like machine emerged from the sky, hovering above the clearing. Its surface was sleek and metallic, with a single red light that scanned the area. The man held his breath, pressing himself against a tree. The alien stood beside him, her eyes narrowed as she watched the drone. After what felt like an eternity, the drone moved on, disappearing into the forest. The man exhaled slowly, his mind racing. "What was that?" he whispered, more to himself than to the alien. She didn't respond, but her expression was grim. She gestured for him to follow her, and they began to make their way back to the cabin. The journey was tense, every sound making the man jump. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, or hunted. When they finally reached the cabin, the man collapsed into a chair, his legs weak from exhaustion. The alien stood by the window, her eyes scanning the tree-line. The man watched her, his mind filled with questions. Who was she? What was that device? And why were they being pursued? The next morning, the man decided to take action. He needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them, the trader who had sold him the alien. He packed a small bag and turned to the alien. "I need to go back to the market," he said. "Will you be okay here?" She nodded, though her eyes were filled with worry. The man hesitated, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'll be back soon," he promised. "Stay safe." The journey to the intergalactic market was long, but the man pushed through, driven by a mix of fear and determination. When he finally arrived, the market was as chaotic as ever. He made his way to the stall where he had first seen the alien, but the trader was nowhere to be found. The stall was empty, its shelves bare. Frustrated, the man began asking around. Most people ignored him, but one vendor, a small, wrinkled creature with too many eyes, pointed him toward a rundown building on the edge of the market. "That's where he goes," the vendor said, its voice raspy. "But be careful. He's not the kind of man you want to cross." The man thanked the vendor and made his way to the building. It was dark and damp, with a single door that creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, he found the trader sitting at a table, a bottle of something foul-smelling in his hand. The man's heart raced as he approached. "You," the trader said, his voice low and dangerous. "I didn't think I'd see you again." "I need answers," the man said, trying to keep his voice steady. "About the alien. Who is she? Where did she come from?" The trader leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't have taken her," he said. "She's trouble. More trouble than you can handle." "What do you mean?" the man demanded. "What aren't you telling me?" The trader hesitated, then leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She's not just any alien. She's a fugitive. The Empire wants her back, and they'll stop at nothing to get her. If you're smart, you'll let her go. Before it's too late." The man's stomach churned. "What Empire? What do they want with her?" The trader shook his head. "I've said too much already. Just know this, if you keep her, you're putting yourself in danger. And not just you. Everyone around you." Before the man could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the building. The trader's eyes widened, and he stood abruptly. "You need to leave. Now." "Wait," the man said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Tell me more." But the trader was already moving, shoving him toward the door. "Go. And don't come back." The man stumbled out of the building, his mind reeling. As he turned to look back, he saw the traitor disappear into the shadows, leaving him alone in the dimly lit alley. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and the man realized he was out of time. He ran, his heart pounding, the traitor's warning echoing in his mind. The alien was in danger, and so was he. But letting her go wasn't an option. Not now. Not after everything they'd been through. As he made his way back to the cabin, the man knew one thing for certain: their lives were about to get much more complicated. The man returned to the cabin, his mind racing with the traitor's warning. The alien was waiting for him by the window, her glowing eyes filled with concern. She stepped forward as he entered, her hand reaching out as if to ask if he was okay. The man nodded, though he felt anything but okay. "We need to talk," he said, his voice heavy with worry. "I went to see the traitor. He told me you're a fugitive. That the Empire is after you. Is that true?" The alien hesitated, her expression unreadable. She turned away, her shoulders tense. The man sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I need to know what's going on. I can't help you if you don't tell me." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, something extraordinary happened. The alien turned to face him, her lips parting as if she was about to speak. The man froze, his breath catching in his throat. And then, in a voice that was soft but filled with urgency, she spoke. "Danger," she said, the word barely above a whisper. The man's eyes widened. You can talk." She nodded, her gaze steady. "Danger is coming." The man felt a chill run down his spine. Her voice was haunting, almost otherworldly, but it was her words that sent a wave of fear through him. "What kind of danger?" he asked, his voice trembling. The alien hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "Empire wants me. They will destroy everything." The man's heart sank. The traitor's warning had been real. The alien wasn't just a fugitive, she was a target. And if the Empire was as powerful as she implied, they were all in grave danger. "Why do they want you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien's eyes filled with pain. "I know too much. They cannot let me live." The man stared at her, his mind racing. He had so many questions, but one thing was clear: he couldn't let the Empire take her. Not now. Not after everything. "We'll figure this out," he said, his voice firm. "Together." The alien looked at him, her expression softening. For the first time, he saw something in her eyes: gratitude. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm, her touch cool but comforting. "Thank you," she whispered. The man nodded, though his heart was heavy. He didn't know what they were up against, but he knew one thing: he would do whatever it took to protect her. Over the next few days, the alien began to speak more, though her words were often broken and halting. She told him fragments of her story: how her people had been peaceful, how the Empire had destroyed her world, how she had been captured and experimented on. The man listened, his anger growing with every word. "They took my voice," she said one evening, her voice filled with sorrow. "Made me silent. But you gave it back." The man felt a lump in his throat. He didn't know how he had given her voice back, but he was glad he had. She deserved to be heard. As they talked, the man began to notice something strange. The alien's abilities seemed to grow stronger. She could fix broken objects with a touch, and sometimes, when she was deep in thought, the air around her would shimmer faintly. It was as if being able to speak had unlocked something inside her. One night, as they sat by the fire, the alien turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "We must stop them," she said. "Before they come here." The man nodded, though he didn't know how. "What do we need to do?" The alien hesitated, then reached into a small pouch she had been carrying. She pulled out a strange, glowing crystal and handed it to him. This is the key. It can stop them. But it is dangerous. The man stared at the crystal, his heart pounding. It was beautiful, but it radiated a strange energy that made his skin tingle. What do we do with it? He asked. The alien's expression was grim. We must activate it. But it will cost me. The man's stomach churned. What do you mean? She looked at him, her eyes filled with sadness. To use it. I must give my life. The man felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. No, he said, his voice breaking. There has to be another way. The alien shook her head. This is the only way. To save you, to save your world. The man stared at her, his mind reeling. He couldn't let her sacrifice herself. Not after everything they'd been through. But as he looked into her eyes, he realized she had already made up her mind. The danger was coming. And they were running out of time. The man sat in silence, the glowing crystal resting heavily in his hands. Its light pulsed faintly, as if alive, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him. The alien sat across from him, her silver skin shimmering in the firelight. Her eyes were filled with a quiet resolve, but the man could see the pain behind them. There has to be another way, he said, his voice breaking. I can't let you do this. The alien shook her head slowly. There is no other way. The Empire is too powerful. This is the only chance. The man clenched his fists, frustration and helplessness washing over him. Tell me everything, he said. I need to understand. Who are they? Why are they after you? And what is this crystal? The alien took a deep breath, her gaze distant, as if she were reliving memories she had tried to forget. My people were peaceful, she began, her voice soft but steady. We lived far from here. We did not seek war. But the Empire, they wanted our world. Our resources. They came with fire and destruction. She paused, her hands trembling slightly. The man reached out, placing a hand on hers. Her touch was cool, but it grounded him. Go on, he said gently. They took everything, she continued. Our homes. Our families. They captured many of us. Experimented on us. Tried to take our abilities. But I escaped. With this. She gestured to the crystal. The man looked down at the glowing object in his hands. What is it? It is a weapon, she said. But also a key. It can stop their machines. Their ships. But to use it, I must connect with it. And the energy, it will take my life. The man's heart ached. Why you? Why does it have to be you? The alien's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. Because I am the last. The only one who can use it. My people gave it to me. To protect others. To stop the Empire. The man felt tears welling up in his eyes. He didn't want to believe it, but he knew she was telling the truth. The weight of her sacrifice was almost too much to bear. There has to be another way, he whispered, though he knew it was futile. The alien reached out, her hand brushing against his cheek. You have given me hope, she said. A reason to fight. But now, I must do this. For you. For your world. The man swallowed hard, his throat tight. I don't want to lose you. She smiled faintly, a rare and beautiful expression. You will not lose me. I will always be with you. In the stars. In the wind. In your heart. The man couldn't hold back the tears any longer. He pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her as if he could protect her from the inevitable. She rested her head against his shoulder, her body trembling slightly. For a moment, they stayed like that, two souls bound together by fate and shared pain. When they finally pulled apart, the alien's expression was resolute. "We must prepare," she said. "The Empire will come soon." The man nodded, wiping his tears. "What do we need to do?" The alien stood, her movements graceful despite the heaviness of the moment. "We must go to the device. In the forest. It is the only place to activate the crystal." The man remembered the strange, metallic structure they had found in the clearing. The symbols, the beam of light, it all made sense now. "Will it draw them to us?" he asked. The alien nodded. "Yes. But it is the only way. We must be ready." The man took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Then let's go." They gathered what little supplies they had and set out for the forest. The journey was tense, every sound making the man's heart race. The alien walked beside him, her presence a calming force despite the danger they were walking into. When they reached the clearing, the device stood as they had left it, the symbols faintly glowing. The alien approached it, her hand hovering over the surface. She turned to the man, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. "When I activate it," she said, "you must stay back. The energy will be strong." The man nodded, though his heart was breaking. "I'll be here," he said. "Until the end." The alien smiled faintly, then turned back to the device. She placed the crystal into a small indentation in the center, and the symbols flared to life, casting an eerie glow across the clearing. The ground beneath them began to tremble, and the air crackled with energy. The man stepped back, his eyes fixed on the alien. She stood tall, her silver skin glowing brighter than ever. He could feel the power radiating from her, a force so immense it made the air hum. And then, she spoke, her voice clear and strong. "For my people. For your world. For us." The light grew blinding, and the man shielded his eyes. When he looked again, the alien was gone, and the device was silent. The crystal, now dark and lifeless, lay on the ground where she had stood. The man fell to his knees, his heart shattered. She had given everything to protect him, to protect the world. And though she was gone, he knew her sacrifice would not be in vain. The Empire was coming. And he would be ready. The man stood in the clearing, the weight of the alien's sacrifice pressing heavily on his chest. The air was still, the forest eerily silent, as if holding its breath. He picked up the now dark crystal, its surface cold and lifeless, and tucked it into his pocket. It was all he had left of her, a reminder of her courage and the promise he had made to protect her legacy. But there was no time to grieve. The alien had warned him that activating the device would draw the Empire's attention. He could already feel the tension in the air, a sense of impending danger that made his skin crawl. He needed to move. As he turned to leave the clearing, a low hum filled the air. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with each passing second. The man froze, his heart pounding. He knew that sound, it was the same mechanical hum he had heard before, when the drone had appeared. But this time, it was louder. Closer. He broke into a run, darting through the trees as the hum grew into a deafening roar. Behind him, the sky lit up with a blinding light. He glanced over his shoulder and saw a massive ship descending from the clouds, its sleek, metallic surface reflecting the sunlight. The Empire had arrived. The man's mind raced as he sprinted through the forest. He needed a plan, but there was no time to think. The ship's engines roared, and the ground shook as it landed somewhere behind him. He could hear voices now, harsh, commanding tones that sent a chill down his spine. He pushed himself harder, his legs burning with effort. The cabin was too far away, and he couldn't lead them there. He needed somewhere to hide, somewhere they wouldn't think to look. As he ran, he spotted a narrow crevice in the rocks ahead, a small cave, barely visible behind a cluster of bushes. Without hesitation, he dove inside, pressing himself against the cold stone wall. The voices grew louder, accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps. The man held his breath, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure they would hear it. He peered through the bushes, his eyes widening as he saw a group of soldiers emerge from the trees. They were clad in dark armor, their faces obscured by helmets. In their hands, they carried weapons that glowed faintly, their purpose all too clear. "Spread out," one of them barked. "Find the target." "She can't have gone far." The man's stomach churned. They were looking for the alien, but they would soon realize she was gone. And when they did, they would come for him. He stayed hidden, his mind racing. He couldn't stay here forever. He needed to get back to the cabin, to the alien's belongings. Maybe there was something there, a clue, a weapon, anything that could help him. But first, he had to lose the soldiers. As the group moved further away, the man slipped out of the cave and began to move in the opposite direction. He moved carefully, staying low and avoiding dry leaves and twigs that could give him away. The forest was dense, and he used it to his advantage, weaving through the trees and keeping to the shadows. But the soldiers were relentless. They moved with precision, their scanners sweeping the area. The man could hear them communicating, their voices cold and detached. He knew it was only a matter of time before they found him. As he neared the edge of the forest, he spotted a small stream. It wasn't much, but it was his best chance. He waded into the water, the cold biting at his skin, and followed it downstream. The current was slow, but it was enough to mask his movements. He stayed close to the bank, using the overhanging branches for cover. The sound of the soldiers grew fainter, but the man didn't stop. He kept moving, his body numb from the cold and exhaustion. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached a familiar part of the forest. The cabin was close. He climbed out of the stream, his clothes soaked and heavy, and made his way to the cabin. As he approached, he scanned the area for any signs of danger. The coast seemed clear, but he couldn't be sure. He slipped inside, locking the door behind him, and leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. The cabin was quiet, the alien's absence painfully obvious. The man pushed aside his grief and began searching through her belongings. There had to be something, anything, that could help him. As he rummaged through a small bag, his fingers brushed against a smooth, metallic object. He pulled it out and stared at it in disbelief. It was a small device, no larger than his palm, covered in the same glowing symbols as the alien's crystal. He didn't know what it was, but he could feel its power. It was a piece of her world. The man clenched the device in his hand, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. He didn't know what he was up against, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going down without a fight. The Empire had taken everything from him. But they wouldn't take his world. The man sat on the floor of the cabin, the small metallic device clutched tightly in his hand. Its surface pulsed faintly, the glowing symbols casting a soft light across the room. He didn't know what it was or how it worked, but he could feel its energy, a connection to the alien and her world. It was a reminder of her courage, her sacrifice, and the promise he had made to protect her legacy. But time was running out. The Empire's soldiers were closing in, and he knew it wouldn't be long before they found the cabin. He needed to act fast. As he turned the device over in his hands, a faint hum filled the air. The symbols on its surface began to glow brighter, and the man felt a strange warmth spread through his fingers. Suddenly, a holographic image flickered to life above the device, a map, marked with a single glowing point. The man's eyes widened. "Is this a location?" he whispered. The device didn't respond, but the map remained steady, the glowing point pulsing like a heartbeat. The man recognized the area. It was deep in the forest, near the clearing where the alien had activated the crystal. Could this be another device? A weapon? Or something else entirely? He didn't have time to wonder. The sound of footsteps outside the cabin snapped him back to reality. He froze, his heart pounding. The soldiers had found him. The door rattled as someone tried to open it. The man scrambled to his feet, clutching the device tightly. He glanced around the room, searching for an escape route. The windows were too small, and the back door was too far away. He was trapped. The door burst open, and two soldiers stormed inside, their weapons raised. The man raised his hands, the device still clutched in one of them. The soldiers' helmets obscured their faces, but their voices were cold and mechanical. "Where is she?" one of them demanded. The man hesitated, his mind racing. "She's gone," he said finally, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "You're too late." The soldiers exchanged a glance, then one of them stepped forward, his weapon aimed directly at the man's chest. "Hand over the device," he ordered. The man tightened his grip on the device, his heart pounding. He couldn't let them have it. It was the only thing left of the alien, the only hope he had of stopping the Empire. But what could he do? He was outnumbered and unarmed. As the soldier reached for the device, the man made a split-second decision. He slammed his hand down on the device's surface, activating it. The symbols flared to life, and a blinding light filled the room. The soldiers stumbled back, their weapons falling from their hands as they shielded their eyes. The man didn't wait. He bolted for the door, the device still glowing in his hand. He could hear the soldiers shouting behind him, but he didn't look back. He ran as fast as he could, his legs burning with effort, his mind focused on one thing, the glowing point on the map. The forest was a blur as he sprinted through the trees, the device guiding him like a beacon. The soldiers were close behind, their footsteps pounding against the ground. The man pushed himself harder, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He couldn't stop. Not now. Finally, he reached the location marked on the map, a small, hidden cave nestled in the rocks. He dove inside, pressing himself against the wall as the soldiers' voices grew louder. The device in his hand was glowing brighter than ever, its energy pulsing in time with his heartbeat. As the soldiers approached the cave, the man closed his eyes and whispered a silent prayer. He didn't know what the device would do, but he knew one thing: he was ready to face whatever came next. The soldiers stepped into the cave, their weapons raised. But before they could fire, the device erupted in a blinding light. The man felt a surge of energy, and then everything went dark. When he opened his eyes, the soldiers were gone. The cave was silent, the only sound the faint hum of the device in his hand. The man stared at it, his mind reeling. What had just happened? As he stepped out of the cave, he realized the forest was different. The trees were taller, the air cleaner, as if the device had somehow altered the environment. But there was no time to wonder. The Empire was still out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. The man clenched the device in his hand, a spark of determination igniting in his chest. The alien had given her life to protect him, to protect the world. And now, it was his turn to fight. The sacrifice wasn't over. It had only just begun. The man stood at the edge of the forest, the glowing device clutched tightly in his hand. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the Empire's ships. He knew they were coming. The device had bought him some time, but it wasn't enough. He needed to finish what the alien had started. The map on the device had led him to a hidden bunker deep in the forest. Inside, he found a control panel covered in the same glowing symbols as the alien's crystal. It was clear now, this was the final piece of the puzzle. The alien had left it for him, knowing he would need it to stop the Empire. As he approached the control panel, the ground beneath him began to tremble. The man turned to see a massive ship descending from the sky, its shadow engulfing the forest. The Empire had found him. The ship landed with a deafening roar, its engine sending a shockwave through the trees. The man shielded his eyes as dust and debris filled the air. When the dust settled, he saw them, dozens of soldiers, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. At the front of the group stood a tall, imposing figure clad in dark armor. The leader. The man's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. He couldn't run. Not now. He had to fight. The leader stepped forward, his voice cold and commanding. "You have something that belongs to us," he said. "Hand it over, and we might let you live." The man tightened his grip on the device. "It doesn't belong to you," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm not giving it up." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Foolish," he said. "You think you can stop us? You're nothing but a speck in the universe." The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned to the control panel and placed the device into a slot on its surface. The symbols flared to life, and the panel began to hum with energy. The soldiers raised their weapons, but the man didn't flinch. He knew what he had to do. The leader barked an order, and the soldiers opened fire. But before the energy blasts could reach him, a barrier of light erupted from the control panel, shielding the man from harm. The soldiers hesitated, their weapons faltering. The man took a deep breath and pressed his hand against the panel. The alien's voice echoed in his mind, soft but filled with determination. "You must finish it," she said. "For your world." Tears welled up in the man's eyes, but he nodded. "I will," he whispered. The panel's hum grew louder, the light intensifying until it filled the entire clearing. The soldiers stumbled back, their weapons falling from their hands as the energy overwhelmed them. The leader shouted in frustration, but his voice was drowned out by the roar of the device. The man felt a surge of power, a connection to something greater than himself. He closed his eyes and focused all his energy on the panel. The alien's sacrifice, her courage, her love for his world, it all flowed through him, fueling the device. With a final, deafening roar, the device activated. A beam of light shot into the sky, piercing the clouds and reaching into the stars. The Empire's ships began to shudder, their engines failing as the beam's energy spread. One by one, they fell from the sky, crashing to the ground in fiery explosions. The soldiers collapsed, their armor flickering and failing. The leader fell to his knees, his eyes wide with shock. What have you done?" he gasped. The man stepped forward, his voice filled with quiet strength. "I protected my world," he said. "Something you'll never understand." The leader's eyes darkened, but before he could respond, the beam's energy reached its peak. With a blinding flash, the Empire's forces were gone, their ships and soldiers reduced to ash. The man fell to his knees, exhausted but victorious. The forest was silent, the only sound the faint hum of the control panel. He looked up at the sky, tears streaming down his face. "I did it," he whispered. "For you." As the light faded, the man felt a gentle breeze brush against his skin. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he could have sworn he felt her presence, soft, warm, and filled with love. The battle was over. But the fight for her legacy had only just begun.